Speaking of injustice, I was walking across the street and a car cut me off. It just blocked my progress into my dope future. And the driver, he just sat there. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you cut me off and you went about your way. He sat there. And I had one of those moments where I had the perfect line ready for the perfect moment. And I stared into the driver's eyes because he wasn't moving. And I said, "Sir, I am not a fan of your work." And he just started crying. Like, what was it all for if not for the fans? Like I put a dent in the universe today. There's a heroin epidemic sweeping the country. It's also spiking here in New York City. What you probably don't know is why it's spiking here in New York City. It turns out 1 out of every 3 new cases of heroin addiction is due to people who decided to spend one day walking with flip-flops in New York City. It's just that disgusting that they walked into a heroin addiction, totally not intentional. Now they got problems. The city's filthy. My girlfriend has moved in with me, and yeah, one person's happy as I am. She started to rearrange certain things. She wants to buy a washer dryer and put it in the kitchen. She wants to move this wicker cabinet that I've had for a really long time, a lot of sentimental value. And she wants to take my deepest, darkest feelings that I put in the closet, in the storage unit behind everything I've ever known and shared, and bring it out into some heat lamps for constant interrogation and investigation. Just a lot of new ideas about how we use the space. I haven't lived with somebody in a while, so it's new. It's new for me, the sharing economy. I grew up in Washington, D.C. in the 80s and 90s, which means I had the privilege of growing up under a crackhead mayor. And he was truly a pioneer. He was the first elected mayor to be convicted of smoking crack, with that act caught on videotape and broadcast around the world. And D.C. is a great city. It's the place where problems go to get bigger. And I think the beauty of having grown up under a crackhead mayor is that the bar is so low that I am super impressed with every mayor I've had since. All they have to do is not smoke crack and have it caught on videotape and have that broadcast around the entire planet. So I'm a very happy citizen of whatever city I've lived in since my childhood. It's been real. My mother had a difficult time trying to raise my sister and me through such an environment. DC was really on the decline, like most American cities were at the time. And she had a unique style. She had a very original kung fu way of trying to raise me and my older sister. We would take vacations, which involved sleeping outside in a national park. I later learned this is called camping. It's very innovative, it's very cool. We would get our food from these local health food cooperatives, or I would even grow our food in a nearby lot, which I later learned was called local organic urban agriculture. And then we would seek spiritual replenishment by hanging out in a Buddhist temple, which I later learned was called mindfulness. And it turns out my mother is the original gentrifying hipster. She just never got credit for it. It's like most things black people have done. Like, black people make it, white people make money off of it. It's like hip-hop and coolness in general. So yeah, she didn't think of putting it all in a truck, and I think that's what she missed. She would put it in a truck, we'd be quadrillionaires. I also just invented a new unit of financial wealth, quadrillion. Should add that to Wikipedia tonight, Joe. My mother was pretty successful in part because she was so anchored in her blackness. And she had super dark skin, like politically she was super black. She was so black that the first book I remember having as a kid is called This is Apartheid. A pictorial introduction. Which led to like a lot of confused protests against Cocoa Puffs by yours truly. Like I was just like angry at anything white for a long period of time. My mom was so black she gave me a Nigerian name, Baratunde, even though we're not Nigerian at all. She wasn't even close friends with Nigerians. She found it in a book. She was so desperate for some connection to Africa. The problem is that the book was wrong. There is no such thing as Baratunde. There is Babatunde. And I know this because approximately 7,000 Nigerians have informed me over the years that I technically don't exist. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. It's so nice. It's so nice. My mom did a good job, though, and I can remember the day I graduated from college. I invited her to be there with me that day, because normally don't want your parents in college, but like it's graduation, you should be here. And she embraced me, and she was crying, and she said, "We did it." And I remember thinking, like, wow, because I took those tests, so I don't understand the first person plural here. I just feel like the grammar's a little off. Like, I understand the synthesis of it, like the feeling of it. It's like, oh, it's a collective, and there were mentors and scholarships, but I actually had to survive those New England winters. I am alone, and I get that it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes that child actually showing up to school every day to get that degree. So my point is, respect your mothers. And part of the reason she was able to do this, my mom had a dope job. My mom was a computer programmer. This is a single black woman with no college degree in the early 1980s. People didn't even know what a computer programmer was then. I think that's how she got it. I think she was so far ahead, she like invented computer programming. They couldn't keep her from doing it because they didn't know how to discriminate against that which did not exist. I remember the day that I understood what her powers as a computer programmer allowed her to do. She was working constantly. It means I arrived home to an empty house, and my one job was to do homework and not watch television. So it's like a little condition: do your homework, don't watch TV. Obviously, I violated those rules because she wasn't there. What she doesn't know can't hurt her. Childhood logic. It's like, duh. So I would go home and I would watch TV, and I would keep an eye out the window to see her approaching. And when I saw that she was very close, I'd turn the TV off, I'd open up a book, I'd start scribbling nonsense she doesn't know. Except she did. Because she would come home, and she would walk over to the television, and she would place her hand on it. Right? And she would feel the heat generated by her lying child. And that's when I realized computer programmers are evil magicians sent from the future to deny cartoons, such as Dennis the Menace and DuckTales, to lonely children in need of companionship after school. Technology's come a long way since the TV-based lie detector test perfected by my mother in 1983. And I've started exploring virtual reality because I'm bored. I mean, 10,000 hours of Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Plus isn't enough entertainment for me. I don't know if you guys heard, but Netflix is actually making a series out of overheard conversations in the bathroom at this theater. They've greenlit 5 seasons, and they're dumping them all this Friday night. 50 episodes at midnight, because that's prime time for great decision making by people. At any rate, I tried virtual reality, and to my surprise, I loved it. It was so realistic. I found myself on a platform like this one, defending a spacecraft behind me from incoming enemy fire from all 360 degrees, plus directly above me, and I had 2 guns. I was like Neo. I literally, I'm not even exaggerating, y'all, I dove out of the way of incoming fire. That's how in it I was. The picture was so clear. I could see into the future, my girlfriend breaking up with me for spending so much time in virtual reality. It was like, oh, so good. So good. And I didn't care because I'm like, I could probably design a new girlfriend inside of virtual reality. And then I hit this like philosophical, metaphysical challenge where I thought, if one is wearing a VR headset and is inside of VR and inside of that simulation, one puts on a VR headset. what happens? Right? Donald Trump becomes president. That's how it is. I set a chain of events in motion. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize what I was doing. I've been trying to think of one word that could describe what Donald Trump has done to the Republican Party, and I think the word's karma. Like, I'm still fishing around for exactly the right one. It's also, for instance, a foreign word which would offend them. Trump's amazing. He's right about one thing, like, he is amazing. And there's so many different like metaphors to describe, like, Donald Trump is like a booger on the bottom of a shit-stained shoe that you should have thrown in a fire 10 years ago, but you know, that's too complicated. So I think he's kind of like your friend who you've dared to do something, but he goes way beyond the dare. Consistently. Like, you've dared him to steal silverware from a restaurant, and he goes into the restaurant and he takes a butter knife and he murders the whole staff. And he's like, I'm the best at dares. Like, whoa! Nobody asked you to kill anybody. What are you doing? And so I find myself now in a very strange situation of hanging out in a space where I used to have friends. It happens every 4 years. It's called Facebook. And when elections come around, they should just relabel it people formerly known as your friends, but now who have ignorant-ass political opinions. And I have some friends who are supporting Donald Trump, and it's not the ones you would expect. It's not the closeted racist or the mail-order steak enthusiast. Like, it's a different category of Donald Trump fan. It's like a liberal Donald Trump fan who says things like, how bad could it be? Or worse, let's make it so bad that people will understand how bad it could be and never make that choice again. Let's shift to a fire safety metaphor to explain why this is horrible. We're all in this theater. A smoke alarm goes off. The reasonable person says, oh, the smoke alarm's going off. We should all exit calmly from the theater. These liberal Trump supporters say we should lock the doors. We should seal the vents and flood the theater with gasoline so that people can really feel the fire, you know? Really understand the flames. We'll be dead before we could make a better choice. I think I'm going to end on death. Thank you, Matt. I'm Baratunde.